I'm not where I am today as a physical therapist, with a bunch of other letters behind my name, because I'm the most intelligent person. It's because I had the right things in place to help me from that very uneducated PFC to now a captain. And I see that as an opportunity. If I like to pay it forward, I see all those things as something I can give to somebody else. So I think on ground, we've been able to at FTC use all those resources that I just mentioned through H2F, and then just simply put it into Future Soldier, rebranded it Future Soldier Prep Course, and then really from our level at the company level and with really caring drill sergeants, really push up to higher, like our intent. We see the mission, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, but we're really taking care of people. And if we really take care of our people, the numbers, we will meet goals. We'll reduce body fat. We'll improve composition. We'll improve fitness. But that whole people first mentality, I know it's thrown around, but I think because you have the right people on ground who really want to live that, and have nothing to gain other than please be a good person when you come out of the program. I think that's what really helps this program be successful. But yeah, initially, I mean, we only had, we heard about this program like 5 weeks ago. The military decision-making process wasn't the most extensive. We tried our best, and we still say we're building the plane in flight. But I think right now we've been blessed to have certain pieces of knowledge to make sure that when we set this foundation up, even though it's rapid, we set it up with the right intent, with the right heart and the right mindset.
Welcome back, guys. We've got a current events episode going on here. Drew, who are we talking to?
Today, we're talking to Remey Dondoyano. She is the current company commander for the fitness training company 120th Adjutant General Battalion at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. That is one of 4 fitness training units in the Army. She's also incredibly certified: physical therapist, certified athletic trainer, certified strength and conditioning specialist, board certified sports clinical specialist. She's also got her USA weightlifting level 2 certification, her CrossFit level 3 certification, and she was prior enlisted as an Army medic and a physical therapy specialist.
And her journey's been pretty cool, and she breaks it down a little bit in our conversation. But along that road from enlisted medic to physical therapy officer, she picked up an interest in CrossFit. She picked up a passion for Olympic weightlifting, including like starting a club for that, encouraging more military Olympic weightlifters. Some really cool stuff where she's trying to like pass on everything she's learned. She's all about coaching. She's all about being a student in all things. And you can pick up a lot of it, especially later in the conversation in this episode, about how just into helping other people be better humans and make the most of their opportunities she is. And in particular, that's very relevant because of the project she's taken on now, which is why we called it a current events episode. She is responsible for the physical fitness component of the Future Soldier Prep Course, which has been in the news a ton. We dig into it, some of the limitations of it, but really just kind of the possibilities of it. Because as much as it gets made fun of a little bit in the news and in people's comments and things like that, I think there is a ton of potential for this thing to do a bunch of good if it's handled correctly.
And we do dive into what the Future Soldier Prep Course is, but kind of the Reader's Digest version is essentially the idea that we can take prospective soldiers who might not fit the height, weight, fitness requirements at the moment, but through this course, and then by the time they finish this course, will basically be eligible to go through basic training. So I came into this with some preconceived biases. I think a lot of people read about this with a lot of biases, but I think Remey did an excellent job explaining sort of the why behind it. And I definitely walked away with a new perspective and, quite frankly, a lot of excitement with how courses and programs such as these can tie into the kind of lifespan of the active duty soldier down the line. So anyway, we have a great conversation with her. Enjoy.
You know what, dude, I'm not kidding. I just had this conversation with my husband in the car, and he was like, you know what if you say something, blah, 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 I'm like, I'm just going to own it. I mean, I'm honest, and I'm only here to try to help people, or at least have a really good conversation, which I'm already having with other people. but now you guys are putting it out there to be able to like have more thoughts in this instead of being in a vacuum. So like, I'm going to own it, whatever happens.
Well, that's perfect because I'm gonna springboard off of that to my first question, which I told Alex I was gonna ask this, and it's a very vague and broad one, but I'm interested in your thoughts. How did we as the Army get to this point? Like, how did we get to the point where we needed to put a program like this in place to bring in more people and basically, I don't want to say lower the standard, but like expand the standard and then put something in place to like get after that, if that makes sense. How did we get here?
I think so. I think I know and understand it. And funny enough, I actually texted somebody something along those lines about maybe adjusting the standard. I don't know what technical term to use, but yeah, I'm really gonna bring us toward the refugee side of things. But how do we get there? I forget who I was watching, but there was a TED talk from 10 years ago about someone predicting this.
I know exactly what podcast that was. That was like
Was it 7 years ago?
It was like, I don't remember exactly how many years ago. I can look it up. So I get the guy's
Yep,
name
I know
right.
the TED talk. We looked this up.
Yep. And it's like, I think this was seen. However, and this is one of those, you figure it the F out, you react to a lot of things. And I feel like that's what kind of happened. And that's why we are where we are. I mean, from my foxhole, and maybe Alex has seen more, but from my foxhole, I've seen we have this deadline. We got to start it by this date, and we got to get all these numbers in by this date, October 1st, November 1st, whatever, October 1st. So to me, it was very rapid in how it was developing, but it sounds very reactionary. And maybe it's the nature of the military, the Army, and the organization in general, but I think that's how we got here, is because it was kind of a reaction to something that I think we could have addressed earlier. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's other factors such as maybe it was something that was thought, but it wasn't a very big priority because we had other priorities 7-10 years ago that we didn't invest into now. Or the thoughts of trying to create something like H2F concept. And of course, that takes time to actually implement, develop, resource, et cetera. So maybe that's just the nature of why we're at this point today. Those are my initial thoughts.
Well, for reference, if anybody wants to go watch or listen to it, because it is like foundational stuff. If you want to talk about like fitness and the military or fitness and national security, the video she's referencing, the TED Talk, is titled "Obesity is a National Security Issue," and the speaker is then Lieutenant General, he's now retired, Mark Hertling.
Yep.
And this ties into something I was just talking to Drew about last night, which is that video is nearly 10 years old now, and all of the things that he identified as problems, in most cases, not every case, but in most cases, those problems have gotten worse. And what that makes me think of, Drew, is the Soft American article from JFK, because that was 1960. So we're talking about 60 plus years ago now. And it's the same exact situation where a leader identified a lot of these issues that were starting to become a problem and like laid out like his, like trying to make it a priority to fix it. And all of those things have gotten worse. Everything identified in JFK's article has gotten worse since then. We've put some stuff out there to try and work on it, but I don't know if we've necessarily moved the needle.
I'm glad you brought that up because I meant to call you out on this today on Instagram. And this is going to timestamp this episode because today you posted on Instagram the fact that you got that article framed from 1960 Sports Illustrated entitled "The Soft American," and you tagged me and I saw it and I thought, people are going to think he's calling me the soft American. Maybe I should do something about this.
I said inspired by. I guess
everyone's
inspired by your softness.
Alex stole my idea of putting the soft American up on his wall. I appreciate it. It's a lovely gesture. I'm not the soft American, but I agree with you about what John F. Kennedy is saying. And I think it's also interesting because we had Dan Bornstein on not too long ago. So this is 2022. That article was written in 1960. The TED Talk we're referencing was about 10-ish years ago. Mm-hmm. Dan just recently spoke in front of Congress about this obesity as a national security crisis thing. So like clearly it's something that's been going on for a long time. So I guess my question for you, Remey, having seen what you've seen with this program and where it's going, albeit it's still very new, mm-hmm. Do you think that it is postured for success, or do you think it's sort of just a gut reaction by leadership to sort of put a Band-Aid on a problem?
Initially, it does seem like a gut reaction. And I've seen other gut reactions happen before, and a lot of the planning was done in a vacuum where resourcing wasn't really involved. But this time around, I've actually been asked, what do you want? Like, how justify your number of XYZ equipment and your personnel, and, ask for the moon or something like that. And I mean, it's nice initially. Honestly, in my entire Army career, I've never been told I could do that. So it sounds like, and speaking of 4-star generals, General McConnell just came down today to kind of ask about the program and see both academic and the fitness track. So I've never seen that before. So I think because of all of those echelons being interested in this, all of a sudden, like there's a special visitor like every week, at least up until this point. It sounds like there might be a little bit more of an invested interest, and which may be different in terms of, instead of just it being gut reaction, if you have the right people on ground who are laying down the foundations, then we're asking for the right equipment for right things and explaining the metrics that we need to actually be concerned about. By the way, I really appreciate one of the Mopsimo's IG posts, Alex. I don't know who posted it, but it was something in reference to metrics that are, or things that are measurable, that are important, something like that. I'm not quoting it very well. I really did appreciate that. It came at a really great time.
It's a version. This is good because we're like, these are themes that extend across episodes a little bit, but I'm working on my list of like, what are the fundamental laws you need to know to have like informed discussions about these kind of things. But it's a version of the McNamara fallacy, which is that we tend to make measurable things important rather than make important things measurable. So like whatever is like readily quantifiable, that's what's going to get tracked, and that's what's going to drive decisions and all of those things, even if it is or is not the most valuable way to measure whether what you're doing is working.
Right. I really appreciated that, because coming from a clinician standpoint, we want to say that we're evidence-based in how we practice evidence-based fitness. That would be nice, but at the same time, getting evidence that, or getting metrics that are actually important to track and maybe valid enough to actually put on a slide and have green little chiclets for. It's like you still have to have the background information just to get to that point. And that's part of the reactionary thing I'm feeling, is where a lot of these metrics are being pulled up there, looking at body composition percentages, but tape tests versus in-body versus bod pod versus DEXA. And I know they've got the body composition tests underway right now, but I mean, I would like to have seen a little bit more planning and validation of what are we really looking to measure? And are we just focusing on body fat percentage composition because we're worried about specific standards? Why can't we use fitness a little bit more, as a test of fitness for them to go to BCT? That's how I feel initially with all of this at this time.
I'm going to ask you one like real direct, real simple question, and you do not have to answer if you think you're going to get in trouble for answering. Okay. You work at a basic training installation. You work with new trainees, and in this case, soon to be trainees, future soldiers. And you've been receiving soldiers and running a fitness program there for a while. How honest do you think the OPAT numbers that new trainees arrive with from recruiting are?
To be honest, I haven't actually seen any of those numbers at all.
Which is, like, to me, kind of astonishing, because that is the baseline, right? Like that is what you would like. That's what determines what they're eligible for. That determines whether you can because this is, we're trying to exercise our way out of a body composition problem, which brings up conversations about nutrition and are we resourcing that side of it appropriately? And it brings up conversations about like discipline and education and behavior change. Like we can't, the Army loves to just like PT people until the problem goes away. And we've had mixed results there with injuries and career longevity and stuff. But I'm curious about how well you think it's gone, because the idea here is that we're going to take a more holistic approach this time, and surely it will work. Is that happening on the ground? Like, do you think there is like enough deliberate attention being paid to like improving the nutrition environment and like talking to these kids about what they need to know?
I think there is, but I think there are some limitations. As an example, there's limitations just even on the number of available registered dietitians to provide nutrition counselings. I think that to me, so I run the warrior training rehabilitation program, WTRP, for the injured basic combat trainees, who instead of pulling them out or separating them, we get them in and rehab them within about 120 days. Their main focus is to rehab, but their, I guess, like the center of gravity for their day and their week are their physical therapy appointments. Everything revolves around that. Similarly, for the future soldier prep course fitness track, I think that the nutritionist individual counselings or the nutrition counselings need to be the center of gravity for that trainee. Because as a physical therapist, yes, I have a strength and conditioning background, and yes, I've gone over nutritional guidelines for training and for safe weight loss. But we have the SMEs, we have registered dietitians in the Army. They're part of the H2F team. We need to use them. And in this program, we need more of those. So right now we only have a few available, and they're being resourced out just by relationships with the MTF, with the military treatment facility, with the H2F team. But we don't have any embedded on ground. I think we need to have them embedded on ground so they're always available, because at one point we had up to like 77 appointments in a week. And for a dietitian, and forgive me, dietitians out there if I made any incorrect judgment or assumptions, but to me, 77 appointments is a lot in a matter of a few days. And that's because we're trying to capture all of those trainees. And so as a company commander overseeing this program, I really, and then a clinical hat with it as well, I made sure that we really include the dietitians in on the planning and those appointments, so we can ensure that we take care of that and have a little bit more weight on all the medical, the safety, and that essentially holistic assessment. As an example, I talked to one of the dietitians and I just asked that provider, what are some things that you are hearing in general? And that allowed me as a commander to look at my list of trainees and go, these are people I need to identify, or I need to take a closer look at, ask more questions about. Essentially, I like to do similar to what a profile review board would be, look at all the different, mental, physical, nutritional, maybe even their background. Where do they come from? What kind of component are they? Are they reserve? Are they active duty? Are they National Guard? Looking at all of those things to hopefully give a better guidance down to the drill sergeants on the ground, to give them some feedback on, hey, let's take a look at this approach for this trainee. And in terms of other nutritional considerations, the dietitians are very invested in the DFACs and in the quality of the food. I think that has been a topic that has been worked on. Higher level leadership is aware of it and they're trying to do something about it. And there's some changes that are actually occurring right now, but I think even that has some limitations. I'm not fully educated on all the processes that go behind the DFAC and working with the individuals and the civilians that work in the DFAC or in the food industry, but the dietitians definitely do. And so they're trying to make some headway into that, because I think just from what I've seen observationally, it's just, structured environment, making sure they have the right fuel. And the education piece, that's where our H2F dietitians come into play. We have more blocks of instruction on mindful eating. We borrowed I think it's the yellow or the red phase POI for tactical nutrition, but we found that that's sort of limited because it's to the BCT environment. We're not focusing on nutrition necessarily in BCT. We're focusing on soldierization skills. So in here, we expanded a little bit more on that and involved the dietitians to develop the POI a little bit more, so that they have a little bit more education on, macros versus micronutrients and mindful eating in general, making proper food choices in the DFAC, other than just looking for the color-coded foods.
And maybe this is backpedaling a little bit, but can we go over the structure of this program in terms of because I know one of the kind of maybe arguments against it or whatever is sort of the length. Is it too short for what we're trying to do? So can we go over the structure, what a soldier kind of is going to go through from day one until the end, and what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so right now, obviously the guidance has been put out that we have 90 days to help a person come from basically no experience in BCT until they are able to meet a body composition standard.
And so just to clarify, so
Okay.
the idea is to a potential soldier, a future soldier, is over the body fat standard, correct?
For a session standard, yes.
Okay. And what is that?
Currently, as of today, the accession standard is about 4% over the general Army standards. I'd have to look at this just to make sure my numbers, my memory serves me well. But I think, like, as an example, for like an 18-year-old male, I think their allowable body fat is like 20%, I believe. So if
Okay.
you go about 4% over, and this is in AR 40-501 as well.
Okay.
Briefly for the audience, just to like
Yeah.
set a baseline, there's really specific stuff that comes directly from Congress on like what the guidelines are for like who the military can take. It's a little bit separate from like individual service policy. There's just like baseline, and it involves your scores on like the aptitude test. It involves fitness stuff. It involves body comp stuff, and the services can get more strict than that, but they cannot get less strict than that.
But so this is designed, and I realize I'm like talking over my own question, and we'll go back to it because I just want to, like, for people that have no clue what we're talking about, the intent was to open up the standards a little bit and essentially train potential soldiers to day one at basic training be where they need to be. So it's kind of like a pre-basic Okay, so with that being said, now go for it. What is the structure of future soldier?
Yeah, sure thing.
Sorry.
Oh, and I don't know if I need to add this too, but maybe there might be it might be worth mentioning kind of what we have that recruiting accessions challenge where a person can get to the recruiting station and they can sign that contract, but by the time they get from MEPS to the reception battalion, at least here at Fort Jackson, they need to have met a certain body composition standard, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So it's like we can get them through the recruiting door, but they cannot ship to basic training because they're not at a certain body composition standard. So that's where we're at. And that's where I come into play. So a typical day or a typical structured week for a future soldier prep course training is that we do an initial assessment. We've been given direction to go ahead and conduct a height and weight and then a tape test to determine their body fat percentage through the regulation. And then they go through a little bit more of just a typical intake. They do a lot of soldierization up front, very similar to yellow face, red face, POI, which means like the very, very basic thing on how do you make your bunk, customs and courtesies, Army values, that kind of stuff. And then they'll also go through an H2F overview. So our H2F team does the introduction to the holistic health and fitness concept. And then they're also introduced to a journal. They're given some material. So they're given a food journal, which was developed by one of the dietitians in my brigade's H2F team. And they go through a few screenings that we've selected to conduct so that we have a little bit more of a screen for anything that might be a yellow or red flag. We currently are doing a screen utilizing, I forget the name of the screen, but it's to screen for eating disorders. We do a self-efficacy screening. And there wasn't an available, readily available, validated nutrition knowledge test. So we made one up just to kind of start off with, just to see, what do they generally know? That was developed by the dietitians. So the intent with that was if once they are about ready to graduate or leave the program, we do that test again. Did they pick up what we put down for them? And then we do utilize the in-body just as another tool to just do get some additional information, not necessarily to override the tape test, because right now we are directed to use the tape test as the measure for their exit criteria. But we at least use the in-body to look at a few more things, to include a little bit of some hydration considerations and stuff like that. And usually the in-body, it's not really helpful. It's not super helpful up front, but I think over time it would be helpful for those that end up staying in the program closer to that 80 to 90 day period, because you really want to know, are they really close? And so anyway, that's generally first week is a lot of intake, a lot of screening. And then I've selected to include the OPAT around the first week, just to kind of get a little bit of a baseline, not reinventing the wheel. The OPAT's already developed. I know they did it at recruiting and they should have passed that, but because I don't see those scores, I don't know how they physically are. So I just utilize the OPAT to start off with, just to assess their general capabilities. And I think the OPAT is kind of helpful because I can at least look at that interval aerobic run we already know that risk of injury is correlated to aerobic capacity, or at least in the military. So I use a little bit of that just for some information on the trainees, and then I even look at their brute lifting strength with that deadlift. There's some, I don't know if we're going to talk about it later, but with the ACFT becoming a test of record, even in basic combat training, I think more. And you can correct me too as well, Alex. More locally, you can kind of have some guidance from local command, or at least at the ATC level about like graduation criteria. But here at Fort Jackson, we kind of look at that 120-pound max deadlift, three rep max deadlift, as someone who's able to at least get through the forge. Now, of course, that's not really been, completely validated as something that shows like much reduced reduction in injury, but at least it's something to start off with. And I'm collecting data on stuff like that just to see, maybe hopefully down the line, if someone wants to look at this data, they can see if there's any correlation between injury rates and their capabilities. But regardless, I use the OPAT just to get some level of baseline physical capability. And then there's several other weeks will just involve building on the first week's knowledge of nutritional foundations. We even go over sleep and recovery. The H2F OT, occupational therapist, will go over some sleep and recovery classes. We include spiritual fitness. So they've brought in I think both brigade and the battalion level chaplains just to provide some additional resiliency pieces and like self-identification classes, help with mindfulness, having the right mindset as you're going through this course that seems to look just at the body composition. We try to steer them away from the number. We try to get them to think more about the lifestyle change. I think the biggest thing that I'm trying to sell to the trainees is you really got to have that self-accountability and really think about your lifestyle. But that right now it's kind of been a little bit of a struggle looking at the numbers. And then what else? Physical fitness. We just basically do, we introduce them to PRT, but we do multiple sessions of PRT with varying levels of intensity. I've curated the PRT to where I don't really reinvent the wheel too much. The only thing I probably added, which is a little bit more direction and ensuring that, hey, these are trainees, treat them like they're red-faced trainees. They don't know anything yet, so they're going to go by the numbers. But if you're doing a lot of instruction in the morning, might be a little bit more high intensity, but on some sort of endurance training machines. So high intensity, low impact work, just to get their caloric expenditure up a little bit toward the end of the day. And then that's basically it. It just builds on. We did build it in a 3-week program because the goal is, let's see if we can try. Let's aim for 3 weeks, 21 days. It's right now just a ballpark number, not really based off of anything scientific. Is just, let's give us a 3 to 4 week period, and then from there let's just see how it goes. Because right now the guidance is it's that this program, well, it said program, it's a course now on ATARs. To me, it's still a pilot. We just started it 2-3 weeks ago. We're in our 3rd week now, and we don't know a lot, but the CG here on ground is understanding that we are building this plane in flight anyway. So we have some room for adjusting.
So I have a few questions written down. But I think where a lot of curiosity and like what people are waiting to see around this thing, because it's obviously gotten a ton of news coverage, a lot of senior leader attention, all this kind of thing. There's been research before on like the results of kind of rapid weight loss programs, both in civilian populations and in military populations. And a lot of that research shows that you can do it, but once you remove those conditions, remove that intervention, a lot of people bounce back to either where they were, or in some cases even worse than where they were. And I think the dream here is that all those things you just articulated, beyond just physical training until they lose weight, the self-efficacy stuff, the resiliency stuff, the like education piece of it, the hope there has to be that this will be something sustainable that they can carry with them and actually change long-term lifestyle behaviors. I'm guessing you have no idea because you've only been at it for a few weeks now, but do you see anything in terms of like what you're hearing them talk about and what you're hearing them say that gives you hope that this stuff is kind of like sticking and they're internalizing it?
It is really hard to say because right now we're battling the whole, I just got to lose 2%. I just got to lose a few pounds. And to me, it's just a challenge getting over that mental it's a challenge to get over the psychological piece. And I think that's, if we can figure that out a little bit better for these trainees, I think that will allow the program to really be sustainable. But right now, given that it was put together very, very quickly, right now it's like time will tell, but collecting data and collecting AR comments about what these trainees are saying, really seeing what the nutritionists are coming away with their counseling sessions, which is huge, because they can at least report that trainee mentioned XYZ about whatever. I think that that's really going to be like a big piece of this whole thing as of this point to determine the success of the program in the future. So I really don't know what are some big takeaways that the trainees have really said. But to me, it's such a challenge changing the mindset and trying to help them realize like it's more than just the number trainee. It's about the lifestyle change. And trust me, the pounds will come off, the body fat percentage will drop. But if you can pick up that barbell, or you can run faster, hey, you're going to be very, very good when you get to basic training. And then a little bit of it is in that mentorship piece with the drill sergeants, or even with us non-drills and cadre. It's telling them, sharing some of our stories. We've seen that big bone, large individual in the military who everyone's like, oh man, that guy's going to be stuck in the height and weight or in the tape line. But that person is like a freaking beast. You pull somebody out can drag a 200 plus pound body, 300 plus pound body, and that person is going to be that person that you would like to deploy with. I definitely know a few of them personally.
Yeah, there's tons of research. People don't talk about it enough, I think, but like there's reams of research on bigger people make better soldiers. And I say that as like a medium to small size person.
Yeah.
But like I vividly remember, this is back when I was a lieutenant, we were chaptering this guy out. He had been a Division I wrestler before he joined the Army, enlisted in the Army. He was overweight, and there were other issues with like how his life had been in the Army, that he wasn't really, things weren't working super great. But he comes to this competition we're running. One of the competition events is like a max deadlift thing. He picks up like 650 pounds, extremely casually, like picks up 650 pounds, looks over at the guy grading and gives him this like big side eye, looks back forward and like sets it down real gently. Like he's not even struggling with it at all. He just knew 650 was what he needed for nobody to come close to beating him. Mm-hmm. And like, it felt weird to know that this guy was getting chaptered out for body composition. Cause man, if my Humvee rolls over or something goes down, I'd really like it if he's the one coming to pull me out. That seems pretty useful.
Yeah, 100%. And some of these trainees that are coming in, I'm like, oh, that could be a new powerlifter for the Army Warrior Fitness team. There's that guy right there. Let me tell him about that. Hey, don't worry about the waist and the tape that's going around your stomach, but worry about the fact that, you can really kill it. If you get better at your cardiovascular conditioning, you can really kill it. And so I am wearing the aerobic capacity shirt, and I really love Chris Henshaw's, ability to recover. And I think the ability to recover can be done by anyone of any stature. But if you really got these strong, capable human beings in the military, and they learn how to develop their aerobic capacity and ability to recover, man, I mean, they don't have to worry about the freaking 2 mile. They'll be fine.
We're big Zone 2 podcast over here, so that's totally fine. Nice. But it does. Yeah. So this brings up, and I don't want to dive down a rabbit hole necessarily, although we tend to do that. But like you mentioned the fact that you want to steer these soldiers, future soldiers, away from chasing these numbers. But the irony is that the whole reason that they're there is because we've created these numbers.
Yeah.
So I kind of asked this question really to both of you. You guys have more experience in the Army than I do, but generally to the military as a whole, like, why don't we just get rid of height weight stuff and have, and I see Alex smiling because this conversation happens a lot, but like, to me, the very easy way to solve this problem is to just have a test. And if you could pass the test, it doesn't matter what you look like. And then all of a sudden, Future Soldier Prep Course isn't about some arbitrary number from some arbitrary machine that science says is the new hotness for, it's just, hey, whatever route we need to take for you as an individual to achieve this fitness standard, it doesn't matter what you look like. As long as you can do X, Y, and Z, you're good to go. To me, it could be naive here, could be a little bit too easy, but it's like that addresses all the issues that you've mentioned in terms of the psychology around it, the tech behind it. Like, we all know that the in-body has like a plus or minus 5% error.
Yeah.
So you could account for that error and say that the soldier has improved over 3 months, but really we've just captured the margin of error. So like yada, 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 yada. The question I'm kind of getting at is more of a toss up to anybody who wants to answer, but like, does that not make this whole situation easier if we just say, hey, here's the standard, it's related to performance, but underneath that we address nutrition, we address sleep, we address blah, 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 blah. Let's just go with that. I don't know why that's so controversial.
Well, I can start with like laying a policy foundation, and this is extremely relevant because news came out this week that changes this even a little bit. But first off, the DoD did change their policy. I think we're getting close to a year since it was published. Maybe it's closer to 6 months. I don't know. But the Department of Defense published DOD Directive 1308.3, which like lays out the body composition policy. And it used to be very, very prescriptive. Like the current body composition policy that the Army has was basically a copy paste from what the DoD told them to have. They didn't have a lot of say in the matter. And that was pretty true across the services. The Marines decided to be a little stricter because they love that stuff. But we didn't have a whole lot of choice. The new version gives the services a lot more freedom as long as they can like demonstrate the evidence basis for what they're doing. The Marines wrapped up their giant body composition study. The Army is wrapping up its giant body composition study to like look at different ways of assessing it and things like that. And the Marine Corps did, in fact, like a single digit number of days ago, just a few days ago, published their like Marine Corps administrative message, MAR admins is what they call them, saying that no Marine will be enrolled in the body composition program or punished or separated based on body composition if it's the tape test. Like the tape test will still be there kind of as a screening method, but no subsequent punitive action will happen unless it uses something like an in-body or a DEXA, which is an interesting direction to go. They haven't, as far as I know, released the results of their actual body composition study or any of the data, so we don't know like what they're making that decision based on. But it opens a whole conversation there. The other thing that the new directive allows is that if you have a high enough PT score, DoD has given the services permission to say that you don't have to comply with body composition testing, and the Marines have done that. I think they have two tests, the fitness test and a combat fitness test, and I think each is out of 300. And if you score over a 285 on both, you have no body composition testing. You don't have to do it. Forget about it. You're done. And I think it'd be cool to see something like that come down in the Army. I don't know what that threshold will be. It will probably be higher than the current passing standard of the ACFT, I would guess. I think it'll be an elevated standard. But I think that would be a really cool direction to go. And then just the last one, because I've heard it from other people. I'm not smart enough on the research to be able to dive into this one. Hopefully somebody smart can like hear this and chime in the DMs or something. But there is an argument to be made that if you have a high body fat content, even if your fitness is good, there are still health concerns associated with that. And because the military bears the healthcare responsibility for not just people while they're in service, but in some cases the rest of their life, if they develop various disabilities, there is a cost concern there that if we allow people to like go way up on body composition as long as they stay fit, that could lead to, whether it's musculoskeletal, whether it's cardiovascular, whether it's osteoporosis kind of stuff, whatever it is, there's a range of health concerns that might not get picked up by the PT test.
But can't you solve for that?
Almost certainly.
By making the test hard. I don't want to say harder because that like raises red flags, but like you can, I'm putting on my sports science hat, you can solve for that. Like if you have a standard, like, okay, 2 mile, now it's a 3 mile, like that will eliminate risk factors just by virtue of you now have to train for that ipso facto.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
well, everything I've heard,
let's go to Capitol Hill.
There are people who get their whole PhD in anthropometric stuff. And like the bottom line, if you talk to any of them, is that anthropometrics are way too complicated to have like a circumference based test of any kind that's like going to actually account for like gender and ethnic differences and like whether it's muscle or fat and like a million different things that make like we're trying to like radically oversimplify a thing that's pretty complicated, which is how the military has done everything. We always oversimplify things and treat people like robots, and they're not, but that's just part of the game.
Well, to that point, I mean, Remey, kind of to shine the spotlight back on future soldier prep course, like, have we oversimplified this whole idea of like, hey, put them through 90 days of this program, and we will drop the number, even though we don't want them to worry about the number, but we're going to drop the number.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we do drop the number, away you go all the way. Like you're in the Army now, assuming you pass basic. Like, I guess we can't say for certain because you mentioned we're just a couple weeks into this, but one of the questions that I have throughout this whole conversation is like, are you guys preparing future soldiers to be soldiers, or are you preparing future soldiers to be like better humans? And what I mean by that is the Army in and of itself creates obstacles to eating healthy, training well, etc. So you guys are putting these guys through a 90-day intensive to navigate what I'm thinking is like just the societal issues around these things. Oh, but by the way, we're going to thrust you into this separate world in which we have a whole heap of issues that quote unquote normal soldiers are already dealing with. Good luck.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's kind of something I've been struggling with too, in terms of like expectation management for this course. My mission is 90 days, body fat percentage, and work on that. And everything else is just, that's great. Do your physical therapy clinician hat thing and do your doctor thing and just make it happen. Yeah, it's been a struggle for me to look at what do I really need to focus on for these trainees. And I honestly feel like right now it's not so much low hanging fruit, but what can we control? Bringing in the MRT in there. What can we control? Well, we can at least control what we're talking about with the trainees. And we can try to do as best as we can to really help shape their mind, because really, like, I don't really see the future soldier prep course as the preparing them to become soldiers, because that's what basic combat training is for. But can we set these former civilians up for a success to when they get through basic combat training, they are going to be set up for success when it comes to I don't have as much sleep, or I'm eating MREs, or I got someone yelling at me now, versus back in reception I wasn't getting anyone really yelling at me. I feel like that is what myself and the cadre can control, is at least that, because I think our the thing that we really want the trainees to come away with is just really being better human beings. I know we got that body fat percentage hanging over our heads, but to me, I see this in a few more other lenses as well. Obviously, as a physical therapist, I would not like to have patients. That'd be great. That means that the patients that are people that are hurt are not hurt. I don't see any patients because no one's hurt. And I would actually really like that. I'd like to focus on strength and conditioning and coaching and all that human performance stuff, and only take care of the injuries that we couldn't control. But I would like to see that the trainees that I see now, who may have poor kinesthetic awareness, not super athletic, that they learn a few things about their body, about running. We even do the running drills here at the Future Soldier Prep course and in FTC in general, but we do the running drills. We go through some mobility classes, some movement quality classes, just so we can at least teach them something that they may have never heard of before, so that if they went through basic training, they got a little bit of that, how to lift a hex bar appropriately prior to the first ACFT. Or if some of these individuals unfortunately did not get through the program, or they have to be separated and chaptered out, did we at least give them something that they can go home with, that they may have have not otherwise had before? And they may have never known that a registered dietitian is someone who's basically he's not just a basic nutritionist, or you can get a personal trainer to give you a diet. No, it's an actual educated person that's looking at a lot of things, not just what you're eating, but what kind of vitamins and minerals are you taking in, and how is your stress like, and how are you looking at what you can eat when all you have is maybe McDonald's, and you have fast foods nearby in your local hometown. I'm hoping to really change, I'm hoping to address the cultural issue that we have currently in our society today, for the trainees that are going to come in, and maybe the trainees that don't stay in. And then the trainees that do stay in, I'm hoping that, one, they don't come back to FTC for WTRP for rehab. And two, when they get to the first duty station, they know how to look at a menu. They know how to use a barbell, how to appropriately not do bro reps of barbell curls in a squat rack. That's one of the things I was like, I was telling all my trainees this is a joke because I'm a big Olympic weightlifter, so I have the whole gym etiquette in my head. But like, I want them to feel empowered, so that way, another PFC Dondoyano down the road, like me, wouldn't be afraid to go to a gym and would be enabled and empowered to continue on their fitness journey, even if they're still one of those that are kind of more on the heavier side. To know, like, hey, you have a little bit more, you can do more. You're not limited because of that body fat percentage, and you're not fat because and then have a really a stigma on that description. I also had something else I want to say about that, because it was a really good conversation I had one of my NCOs. But yeah, I mean, I see the course as an opportunity, really, as opposed to just looking at those numbers. And
When this was first announced, it got clowned on a lot, and people are talking about like the comments about lowering the standards and like whatever it is. People always have like criticisms they want to make, but
Back in my day.
something I've been thinking about a lot is honestly, like, what if this goes too well, right? Like there is the possibility that this demonstrates a serious degree of effectiveness, and now you've got like other services calling you because they want to institute a pre-basic program, or you've got high schools calling because they want to model some physical education stuff off of this, or some whatever health classes. And it would not be the first case of insurance companies paying for like a multi-week intensive health intervention that reduces body composition and improves lean muscle mass and all these things. Like this is something our whole society struggles with. If a person wanted to pay to get the services these future soldiers are getting, it would cost a whole lot of money to get like attention from that many specialized professionals working together in a dedicated environment where you also have lodging and food and all this stuff. It's like a potentially really cool thing. Like on its surface, you can make fun of it or whatever, but I think there's potential here that if we like track the data terribly well and like capture the lessons we learn and improve on some things and iterate a few times, we could come up with something that, like, we spend a ton of money on healthcare in this country, right? Like, why not spend a little bit of it on creating whatever this is? Maybe it has nothing to do with going into the military. Maybe it's just, hey, I'm not a particularly healthy person. I want to learn the skills I need to take care of myself. I want to go to whatever this program is for 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 9 weeks and figure all that stuff out. I wonder if you think that like that's on the horizon for this thing, like if that's a direction you could see it going.
I definitely do. And that's what I hope, because this pre-basic training course, it's like one of my biggest questions was when were we doing this? Isn't future soldiers something that we do at recruiting anyway? But I know the recruiters have their own challenges, and they've got a different mission set than we do. And their time and their span of time, and even weekends, it's way different from us. So I understand that they have that struggle. So maybe for me, what I see is, if this was going to expand, I would hope that it goes to a local recruiting station, lessons learned. If they don't have any resources, the local recruiting station doesn't have an H2F team, but do they have a nearby brigade that does? The brigade unit or that brigade's H2F team can do the whole up and out. They can go and provide some consultation to a local recruiting unit and help them maybe stand up a program. Now, I know some recruiting stations probably already have something very similar. I've seen a couple. I'm just following on social media. I see them doing some really good things with their recruits classes. They definitely do some well-structured PRT sessions. Maybe adding in a little bit, sprinkling a little bit more knowledge bombs on nutrition, on recovery, on that spiritual, mental fitness piece. That's where I kind of see closer in the horizon, is maybe we reach out to them. And I've brought this up to leadership of, I know we could probably always blame somebody else to the left of us. Oh, you brought us these recruits, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we see this whole thing as an opportunity. I also was very attuned to the criticisms of this program. And I never took it personally, because like I can see where people are coming from when it comes to the question about lowering standards. But how I see things in the Army or in anything in life is, okay, I see that. What's the opportunity around this? Right now, we can't change some kid that came off the street and came to us and doesn't know how to move, sits and slouches, and only is used to eating something from plastic, from a plastic bag. So can we maybe empower him and teach him, or empower her and teach her, build up self-confidence? So that way that person is a lot better off when they go to their first duty station, Fort Polk, instead of going and getting their little tornadoes after PT. They're making much healthier options, and they're food prepping, and they're really forcing the local unit to provide for them healthier eating options, making more of a stink about, hey, we don't have healthier options in the shop pit. Can we try to get some of that? That's what I would hope to have in the near future.
Well, this is one I'll like ask the audience here if anybody like knows more, because I don't know a ton, but it's like a fairly well established thing that of the three components of the Army, one component has the highest pass rate at basic training by a fairly substantial margin, and it's not the active component, it's the National Guard. And like, reason being because they seem to do better on that pre-basic stuff. They have what's called RSP, Recruit Sustainment Program. These guys don't necessarily go to basic first. They might be with their unit for a few weeks or even a few months before they go to basic training. And that gives them this cool window of opportunity to provide them some knowledge and put them through some stuff and prepare them. And I think we could probably learn a lot from that. And like the sharing of knowledge we could get between like RSP people, you guys, like recruiting stations anywhere, to start moving this thing in the right direction of how do we give people the right knowledge before they even get to basic training. And I think a lot of it has to do with just spending more time on your feet, sleeping a little better, eating a little better. But that's all stuff that is certainly relevant to like recruiting and the readiness of the military, but is equally relevant to like things we should be getting into public education. And there's a whole opportunity here for us to continue the dialogue with all these people who have like a piece of the puzzle figured out.
Yeah, completely agree. Because we have all, I feel like we have a lot of the answers now already. We just have to put them together and make them digestible, market it in a way that allows our current society and our generation to actually own it, have that buy-in, and then just take off.
Do you think this may be a hot take question, but it's not my intent. Maybe it is my intent. Do you think that we have set this program up simply to boost recruitment numbers, or do you think it is being set up because there is a genuine sense of caring for the next generation of soldiers? And the reason I ask that is because we talked a little bit already about a lot of success may come from this. And I would wonder if that's because of the nature of the program, or just the fact that we now have invested a very intensive level of care at the level of the individual. Oh, but wait, when they get to the regular military, they may not have that available to them. And so coming back to the question, it's like, if we only care about numbers, that's one thing. And if that is the case, then I would imagine that we might see down the road, folks that graduate from this program may fail or encounter roadblocks later on in their military career. Vice versa, if we are doing it because we care, well, then we may see a trickle-down effect where we start to invest. And H2F, I think, gets at this a little bit, but even more so, just really investing much more into the like quote unquote people first thing, actually providing, healthy meals at the commissary, actually getting, people have heard me talk about this all the time, getting fast food off of military installations. So again, the question and potentially the hot take is like, is the Army doing this because we got to boost numbers for Congress, or are we doing this because we actually give a shit?
Well,
go crazy with that one.
So my first impression, I'm just going to be straight up honest, is that we were given a deadline, we were given a mission. It was very, very quick. If you're going to invest time in people, in resources, and do the right intelligent thing, it wouldn't be that quick. So if it's that quick, to me, it feels like we're trying to meet a numbers game goal. But I think we've been very blessed on ground to have the right personnel, being told, here's your mission, your task. We need more trainees to get through basic training or into basic training. Okay. Luckily, the fitness training company, FTCs, already has done a lot of these things. I'm a very big proponent of H2F. I felt like I've preached H2F before the term H2F even came into being. And yes, I'm going to say I did CrossFit and all the great stuff. And have you heard of Lawrence David? Great class. But no, but I mean, like, I was that kid who could barely bench press a 45-pound barbell. I didn't even know how to do a clean and jerk or a snatch. Snatch is Olympic weightlifting term, everybody out there who are not Olympic weightlifters. But I had all those components of H2F in my life where I was enlisted. I was a 68 Whiskey November 9 physical therapy specialist and a healthcare specialist, combat medic. Very, very small individual. I'm very short and very and petite and not the most physically capable person, but I had a very good coach who did things like we did this nutrition challenge, and I had a food journal. I had an activity journal. I started following people that were giving me both training guidelines and nutrition guidelines. And it also involved things like mindfulness, not necessarily yoga per se, but it was things about how do you look at your workout? How do you strategize? How do you XYZ in your workout so that, like those chipper workouts where big ass wad, but how do you break it down? I literally practiced those same things in my life when it came to school, undergrad, physical therapy school. And I saw all those things, and I only say those things because I'm not where I am today as a physical therapist with a bunch of other letters behind my name because I'm the most intelligent person. It's because I had the right things in place to help me from that very uneducated PFC to now a captain. And I see that as an opportunity. If I like to pay it forward, I see all those things as something I can give to somebody else. So I think on ground, we've been able to at FTC use all those resources that I just mentioned through H2F and then just simply put it into Future Soldier, rebranded it Future Soldier Prep Course, and then really from our level at the company level and with really caring drill sergeants, really push up to higher, like our intent. We see the mission, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, but we're really taking care of people. And if we really take care of our people, the numbers, we will meet goals. We'll reduce body fat. We'll improve composition. We'll improve fitness. But that whole people first mentality, I know it's thrown around, but I think because you have the right people on ground who really want to live that and have nothing to gain other than please be a good person when you come out of the program. I think that's what really helps this program be successful. But yeah, initially, I mean, we only had we heard about this program like 5 weeks ago. The military decision-making process wasn't the most extensive. We tried our best, and we still say we're building the plane in flight. But I think right now we've been blessed to have certain pieces of knowledge to make sure that when we set this foundation up, even though it's rapid, we set it up with the right intent, with the right heart and the right mindset. So I'll go with that.
Well, as you're talking and saying that, like I almost think, and I say this, I'll put on my work hat as like an H2F director. It's almost incumbent upon those of us who serve in embedded positions, Army, Marines, Navy, Special Operations, conventional, whatever, to like reach out to people in your position and recruiters and folks that are responsible for kind of throwing the carrying arms around that individual and then walking them all the way through to the active component so that by the time they get there, it's just a continuation of care. And then obviously the next conversation beyond that is like getting into the VA, and that's a whole different, bag of worms. But
yeah, definitely.
I don't know if relying on kind of big government, big army, whatever you want to call it, to sort of solve this problem. They're never going to look away from the numbers because it is a numbers game at that level. But I think there's enough of us now in the positions that we're in to say, hey, you guys at kind of the early doors scenario, like what are you dealing with? What are you seeing? And then how can we assist so that by the time they get to where we're at, we can just kind of keep that ball rolling. That might be too like, fuzzy, but it makes sense.
I mean, I think the onus is on us as individuals and professionals that you're right that are embedded. I mean, that's why I think H2F is awesome. When I was a younger physical therapist, my goal was to be a special forces group PT because I've heard of Thor and I'm like, Thor's already doing all the cool things. Why aren't we doing that in conventional army? Conventional armies adopted the lessons learned through H2F. And I think it's at a lot of the, and Oz can attest to this, like all the gripes and complaints are usually happening at the lowest level. And then the great ideas, good intent, it might be coming from top, but by the time it trickles down, it gets diluted, and then the actual intent and maybe the plans of how to execute get lost in as it gets filtered through different echelons, and it's at us at that lower, most direct level, especially at the company commander level, where we have really the most responsibility. I teach a injury prevention course for the commander first sergeant course here, for the new commanders and first sergeants going through the initial entry training environment. And my 90-minute class usually, or my 45-minute class normally gets expanded to 90 minutes, because I'm trying to really impart on my fellow company commander and first sergeants is that it's our job. This is that last position at that lowest rung where we really have the most direct influence, especially on the cadre, who also are, to me, like the trainees. They need that same exact care because they're putting all of their heart and soul into somebody else outside of them. So it's my responsibility to make sure that that team of cadre is enabled, educated, well rested, and encouraged, so that I can entrust them to really take care of those trainees. So yeah, I completely agree with you on the responsibility of that embedded professional.
All that stuff got me thinking really hard in like a bunch of different directions. I really liked what you guys were talking about.
No big deal. Chime in anytime.
There was, I've realized this like gradually over the last few months, but like as a lieutenant, as a captain, you're still young in the Army. You've only seen a piece of the Army. I did almost all of my time in brigade combat teams, so I thought that's what the whole Army was like. Turns out it's not. I also thought that I had thought of the Army as like a fairly cohesive organization that could like move in one direction. Everybody was on the same page, which that turned out to be like the least true thing ever. I have come to learn that it's this like giant disorganized community. We all happen to wear the same outfit and like say some of the same words sometimes. We know a couple songs, but
it's not true. You guys have 2 dress uniforms now.
Yeah, well, we change up the uniforms all the time. That's a whole separate story. But like realizing how disorganized it is made me a little bit more sympathetic to like the challenges of senior leaders and the challenges of strategic leadership. But it also has been cool to see like the flip side of that. This human performance community and this like tactical human performance community is an astonishingly small community. People kind of know each other all over the place. And this is going to get cheesy for a second, but it's like kind of something I've liked watching from the Mops and Mo's perspective, and like creating a page and getting these messages and getting to know these people. Remey, I didn't really know you at Fort Jackson, but I had like heard your name because other people, like people I worked with you. I was aware of the FTC and all that stuff. And it's cool to see like when I was at Fort Jackson, H2F didn't exist. Now it does. You're still there. You're doing this stuff, like incorporating H2F into it. And like being able to build some of these bridges and like help make these conversations happen where other people can hear them. I really hope like the ultimate success for this episode would be for like people to reach out because they know they can assist with this or can learn from this, right? Like a recruiter from the National Guard who knows a ton about RSP and can share the lessons learned, or like whatever it is. I hope that like having this dialogue helps more people get involved in this and helps them solve some of these problems.
I really completely agree with that, because one of the biggest things I feel as well going through my military career is we have these things called continuity books. We've got after action reviews. Yeah, what do we do with that? We have the center, for lessons learned, for Army lessons learned. What are we doing with that? And that stuff won't really be used unless we bring it up, we use it, we discuss it, we criticize it, we adapt, and we all maybe improve on it. And I think that I really do hope this does open a lot more conversations on while it's just a relatively small program now. I really hope it opens up more conversations and expands beyond basic training, to left of people going to basic training, and then right of people just finishing basic training going into AIT, because we don't seem to have enough conversation, and we don't seem to use all of our big brains that we have scattered throughout the world. We don't always come together in a unified way, and really share. Sometimes maybe someone's just has a little hole of success, but it's really cool when you can see some of the things that lessons learned and lessons applied be executed. As an example, in the physical therapy world, we all have this walk to run or return to run progression. It's also on the on the profile and an Army profile, you'll see that little thing. And I was like, wow, I really like this. And my physical therapy classmates and I, during our internships, we saw that same chart be used in different clinics, from Lackland to Randolph to Baines Jones down at Fort Polk. And when I saw it all over the place, I was like, you know what? At least it's being utilized, and that's cool. And we always just built on it, and it just made life so much easier. So yeah, I hope it really opens up more conversations.
We're closing in on kind of the 1 hour mark. And so in terms of like wrap up questions, one of the ones that I have for you is, and acknowledging that this, like you said, program is still very new, what does success look like? Is it purely numbers of soldiers that have passed, or do you guys already have a framework in place, or have you talked about putting a framework in place to like track these graduates through basic and then through their careers to see if, hey, maybe there's a world where we're passing a lot of soldiers, but a lot of that has to do with kind of the stress response that they're getting from a 90-day intensive. But turns out, I'm making this up, like 75% of them fail out of basic. Like, have those conversations happened? And I'm just kind of curious as to what you guys are considering to be success versus unsuccessful.
Let me address the data collection and the numbers tracking piece. That has been a question, and right now it's just a matter of us making sure we do the tracking of through the G1 channels of just asking, hey, where is this trainee? And we are tracking trainees that exit the program. We do track where they end up, and if they are basic combat training graduates. I've not yet seen, although I think it's probably something that can happen. It's just, I'm going to need some additional resources and help on making sure that we can track these trainees once they get to their AIT location. And if they graduate AIT, and then anything injury rates, I think that might be a little bit difficult, because even for myself now, I don't always see which trainees. Well, I do see trainees that come to FTC for rehab, so that's for me easy to track. But I may not see the trainees that end up separating for physical or other reasons, and they don't end up at FTC. I don't know how that's going to work, but I'm pretty sure there's a way. Where there's a will, there is a way. We track all these people anyway, so there's just got to be that deliberate tracking at higher echelons. But in terms of success, maybe this is too far in the future. I'm not sure, but my idea of success would be we had to adjust the ACFT scores higher because more of our force is fitter. That would to me would be amazing. I know it's like a wish right now, but I would love to see, hey, and this is for you, Alec, hey, we're going to bring back the leg tuck, and you're going to learn how to actually pull.
Don't get him started on that.
No, hey, okay, just real quick. I know we're at that hour mark, but I really loved the leg tuck because it really made people realize what they can do. Instead of like, I can't do a leg tuck. No, you went through a program, you freaking got one leg tuck, and that's at least passing for now.
Sticker out.
Yes. I love it. No, it's awesome. And I tell this all the time during my courses, my classes, like, I really wish they bring back the leg tuck because it enabled people. I could not do a pull-up when I first started CrossFit, but I worked hard on it. I could not do a muscle up. I worked hard on it and I got it. And I got small arms, but I think a lot of people were able to do the leg tuck after a while. So I would say one for the leg tuck, but I might be an unpopular opinion. I might be along the side of
Leg Tuck Nation. So you're in the
yeah,
right place.
gonna speak directly to Leg Tuck Nation out there. Just a reminder that it is still in the doctrine. You can absolutely still do it. You are encouraged to do it. Help your soldiers have that moment of learning and like achieving and like self-efficacy, like knowing that they can achieve the ultimate exercise, the leg tuck.
Oh, plus more people will get through air assault school for that very first event where they just got to do a rope climb. Yep. That was like the easiest thing. Thanks to the leg.
I will ask you a final question, unless Alex has one more, but okay. You sort of already have the keys to the program, but what I'd be curious in hearing from you is if you were to be given a blank slate and said, hey, Remey, we want you to build this future soldiers prep course. You can have whatever you want. It can be however long you want. Like, what would that look like for you?
For myself, I would say that I definitely have a lot more resources in terms of I'd have basically an HTF facility, because we're expecting to get those later. But in order to train so many people, having a large enough space to be able to accommodate them, I'd have more classrooms to really have a little bit more of a tiered approach for trainees that are generally fit. Maybe they just need more nutritional knowledge, or trainees that were experienced. And I heard of a trainee that did did several marathons, but yet he's in this program. He just needed a different approach. I'd have a whole HRF team embedded within this program, specific for that program, so that we can set them up for success on the expectations of what they should see. Granted, I know the Army's working on it still now, but if they're going to really be pushing for filling up those HRF slots, why not have it right there in the beginning within basic combat training for this program before basic training? There's just a few things. In terms of timeline, it was hard for me to figure out a timeline, but I think at least having the right persons and the right resources, just to start off with, is what I would prefer for this program.
Well, awesome. I think we will be very curious to check back in a few weeks and see how it's going, I think, or a few months or however long, until we start to get a better picture of like not just the MOPS, but the MOs. I think there's, like we've said many times over the course of this conversation, I think there's a ton of potential here, and it'll be really interesting to see how much of it we actually get to take advantage of.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Remey, thank you for your time. This is definitely a side of the military that I don't think many people know about or even think about. So this was enlightening.
Yeah, not a problem. Also tell everybody it's not fat camp.
It's not fat camp, everybody.
I want to change the history of FTC, or the fitness training units, being called fat camp. It's a lot more than that. So come on down, come check it out before you call it fat camp.
That's awesome.